Hi there, it's Kevin with the Rogue Market, here with this week's episode of the Market Monday. You heard me right. I've decided to move the Market Monday over to this channel. That way we can be more streamlined for what the specific channels are about. So I'm going to keep all the brews and the rants and the analysis over at the Rogue Deck Builder, and this channel is going to be strictly for the finance. So anyway, let's get into the video. I did a video over at the Rogue Deck Builder with my analysis of the standard bans that were announced today, and they banned a lot of cards. So basically anything that was tier, they took a piece from that deck and banned it. So there's been a lot of movement in the market as everyone is trying to guess on what will be the next best deck. And of course that has caused some buyouts and just a lot of movement, as we'll see here when I go over the data. So this video we're actually going to discuss that, what cards have gone up, and I'm going to give some predictions of where I think other cards might have some potential of going back up, because of course week one people are going to be all over the place. Right now people are gravitating to kind of the obvious answers, so the next best decks that didn't get touched. And starting off with that, we can actually look at a card that is spiked up, and that's the Agatha's Soul Cauldron. So this is actually a double dipper, more of a double dipper. There's a plethora of decks that actually use it, but there were actually two what I would consider tier 2 decks. They were on the up and up before the ban announcement. So the first one is Insidious Roots, and that had a great matchup versus both mono red and against Izzet. So it's losing one of its best. It did pretty well against, but I think where a lot of people started running this deck is it had answers for every deck. It did fine versus the aggro shells. It had hate cards against the combo shells, especially with having access to things like Scavenging Ooze and other cards that could just, exile cards no problem. And I mean, Agatha's Soul Cauldron is pretty good at just being a hate card against graveyard-based decks to begin with. So it had a pretty decent matchup versus those to begin with. So I think that Insidious Roots actually might suffer from the ban list, but the deck is complete. It's got everything it needs to compete in the standard environment, and as I said, it was already on the up and up before the ban list was announced. So where this double dips though is PVDDR ran this gem of an Izzet kind of prowess. This is more of an Izzet combo deck that is utilizing the Agatha's Soul Cauldron as well. So let me zoom in here so you can actually see the deck list here. And this one tried to combo off with Vivi, and then a Voldalian Thrillseeker. So basically you're going to just draw, add a ton of mana. All your other creatures are going to start adding mana that you have out because of the Vivi activation. So you want to get a Vivi in the graveyard, and then you can basically just go off on one turn with then sacking everything with Voldalian Thrillseeker. I mean, it's a pretty aggressive deck to begin with. The Marauding Mako and the Fear of Missing Out and Tersa's Light Shatter. Like, I have a deck that's just a mono red monument, and it's a very aggressive deck by itself. So this has this kind of 1-2 punch where the opponents have to deal with the aggressive side of it, and then it can always threaten to combo off. So the Agatha's Soul Cauldron is absolutely going nuts right now. It was selling for about 5 to 10 per day, and you can see today it has sold pages worth of copies. And at one point the foil was actually the cheapest version. They keep like leapfrogging each other, and that's a card is active in as a buyout is if the foil versions are actually lagging behind, because the constructed players are going to be picking these up and they're not even going to think to search for foils. They're just going to go to the cart, buy the non-foils. Some people like me, we prefer not having foils in our decks if it's going to be like a deck that's going to be used for competitive play. As you can see, you can keep scrolling and scrolling and scrolling, and I mean, what is that, on to 3 clicks here by the time we get down. And there's been a lot of 14 copies here, 7 copies, 3 copies, 1 copy. So this is legit. There are a lot of people now that are thinking this is going to be the next best deck, and Agatha's Soul Cauldron has a lot of room to grow. At one point this was like a $50 card, and then has gone back down. Wildsville Drain did receive its last call, I believe. I don't think there will be. No, it did not. So there was a recent reprinting in Wildsville Drain, so it's still eligible to having more reprints. I mean, this set is just packed full of goodies, and that can keep the price down of like Agatha's Soul Cauldron, because there's just so much value in the Enchanted Tales slot. So if this does get more reprints, this could easily stabilize. But the standard demand for this card is definitely going to make it go through the roof within the next coming days. And this is also a good rule of thumb, something I did practice more of what I preach here, is always sell into the spikes. So this card is going to spike back up to like 40-50 bucks in my opinion. I think that's a good time to get out on it, because a card, even as a mythic, It does have a lot of play in like EDH, but once it hit about $50, that's the time I would assume to get out of cards. It could go up a little bit more, but you're probably going to see little waves of these. Even if it stabilizes and is the best deck, oftentimes these buyouts are when it's going to be the highest. All right, so if we go back over to some of the other movers and shakers, of course, in the next deck. So what I said in my video is that people are just going to gravitate to what was good before Quarry Stealer Cutter was in the format. And at that point, like Jeskai Oculus decks were pretty popular. So of course, we're seeing a run on the Oculus. And this card was expensive as well at one point. Yeah, it was going like $50 at one point, and then it fell way out of favor. In fact, it saw barely any play, I believe, at the Pro Tour, and all of the tournaments leading up to it also didn't have the greatest showing of people actually wanting to play this deck. But it still has all the pieces. It still is kind of the core of the deck before Quarry Stealer Cutter. It still does a good job of combating some of the decks that existed at that point, like Dimir Midrange and Mono Black, which were also and Golgari, basically it's kind of the black tempo or black mid-range. This can go wide, it can go over the top, it can be very aggressive. It requires hate cards are good against it, but they're not like backbreaking. And it was just a very, very consistent deck. And you can see as well, we're starting to see a run again on the Oculus. So I think this card does have a lot more room to go up. In fact, if you actually look at this, it seems like more copies were sold of the Aberrant Oculus than there was the Agathas. So if we actually go on to the next card, of course you have to weed out some of these Final Fantasy cards because they still have plenty of demand for just casuals picking up and collectors still picking up. But if we go down to, we got like Beza, the Bounding Spring, and Caretaker's Talent. So this was another deck that was good pre-Quarry Stealer Cutter. This deck could easily outgrind the Mono Black and some of the other mid-range type shells. So the whole theory behind this deck is to get a Caretaker's Talent out and then start creating some tokens, and that is the advantage that is eventually going to grind out. And then once Caretaker's Talent gets up to 4 creature tokens, we get +2/+2. So yeah, it never really had its Day in the Sun is the best deck. You can see there's been a long time since anyone's even posted a finish with this in Standard, where it's not even registered on Goldfish radar here. But this deck was a very popular deck, and again, I think that the reason why this card is going up is the same reason. People are trying to figure out, okay, what was good, what could be a potential card that will go in that deck, and of course now is the right time to get in on these. So again, this card has just seen a ton of sales in the last 24 hours post the ban announcement. Beza is just the shoulder of white. This card is good. So if white actually is the thing is, this card was seeing a decent amount of play in a lot of decks, like the Overlords were running it as a stabilization card. I mean, it's really good against aggressive shells. Like if aggro slows down, then Beza actually gets really, really good, because the problem with like Bezas and shoulders that were good against like shutting down aggro, just being this huge roadblock, is in a format with the Heartfire and Monstrous Rage, you're too slow. 4-drop is way too slow. And so it really didn't have a home against those particular matchups. So now we are starting, after I've been playing Arena today, just trying to get a feel of what people are gravitating towards. And there's a lot of like aggro low to the ground. We're seeing people going back to like Clerics. We're seeing Gruul Delirium come back. We're seeing like the Landfall Tifa combo deck. A lot of people like really messing around with even Lizards. Those are all like a couple turns consistently slower than the Mono Red or the Izzet was. So it makes cards like Beza incredibly strong going forward, as they are consistently to be able to come out on turn 4 without the fear of, if you have like a removal spell like a Get Lost, you can then cast a Beza and then restabilize. So these cards, I think, are going to start seeing a lot more play. Speaking of the Bristly Bill Spinesower, I don't know if this is a ban list or if it's still people trying to build Tifa decks in EDH. I know it's a super popular deck, deck for that. And in Standard, it can do like a turn 3 combo with you have to have a Bristly and a Tifa, and then you can actually combo off. So turn 3 or turn 4. But I don't know. Anyway, that's one of the key components of that, because that could be one of the reasons why that was going up. But all in all, this is a good way to just go over to the movers and shakers from Goldfish and to kind of look at what is moving. But this deck is all about my predictions of what I think are going to go up in value. And I'm surprised that this one is fallen kind of under the radar. Actually, we'll look at some of the data for these cards. But the next one is like, I think Dimir Midrange is by far the most poised deck to be kind of the enforcer. And its worst matchup was Izzet, by far. Izzet just outgrinded this deck. This deck does suffer from mono black. I believe it doesn't have the greatest matchup versus mono black. It was one of its tough ones either. But this is another deck like the Insidious Roots where you can actually sit down and just feel comfortable going up against any matchup. So there are a few key cards in this Dimir one that have the potential going up. But the first one is Kaido. Kaido has spiked up before, then gone back down. And the other one is Enduring Curiosity. Same thing. Enduring Curiosity in this deck at one point had 4 copies. This particular version is only running the 2. There are also a lot of other goodies in this one, like the Preacher. Preacher of the Schism doesn't rotate. Most of these do not rotate. This deck actually is going to be pretty rotation proof. It does lose some key cards in like the cut downs. Like the removal package is gonna suffer, but you got to assume that Wizards will come out with some sort of 1-drop. In fact, in their ban list announcement, they talked about how they think that 1-drops are a little too powerful in the format right now. So having answers towards 1-drops is something they're looking to kind of shear up that. And so I'm expecting like a replacement, like a Fatal Push or some sort of card to replace Cut Down once it rotates out. And these other ones that like go for the throat and Anoint with Affliction and the Shieldred's as well, the Shieldred's Edict, they all have just 1-for-1 replacements that are like situationally just as good. And Anoint with Affliction, one of the reasons people were running Anoint with Affliction was to get around Monstrous Rage because it pumped it above like what Cut Down with the power toughness, and the Exile effect would stop like the Heartfire from actually triggering. So I don't think that's as relevant as it was with exiling rather than destroying. I mean, there still are, of course, cards that do want to be exiled, but there are plenty of other options instead of Anoint that I don't think that the removal package is going to actually affect this as much. So anyway, I'm getting too much of analysis here of the decks rather than talking about the cards that I feel are poised to go up in price. This Azure Beastbinder is kind of neat. There are a lot of Dimir decks that are going in this, but it's definitely not the consensus with Dimir. Like typically what these Dimir decks want to do is the Spyglass or a few other 1-drops, and you have something like Enduring Curiosity. So those are my picks for this one, is like Preacher of the Schism, Enduring Curiosity, and Kaido. So let's take a look at those real quick and see what they're selling out to see if they have potential of going back up. So a Mythic in 2 colors typically can't get above $20. That's just a rule of thumb because it really limits the amount of decks it can go into. So Kaido does seem to be, well, it definitely is at its low for like 6 months, yeah. And you can see a little bit of a spike in price. And yep, this is another one that is being targeted at the moment. So this one probably, as the meta starts to materialize and figure out the Dimir, is probably the best deck. I think there's going to be a lot of sales within the next couple weeks. So this one looks like a really good potential to get in right now. And of course, Enduring Curiosity, this is another card at one point was, $10 card. Another card out of Dustborn. Dustborn's looking really good now with these bans. So there's a lot of cards that are extremely powerful in Dustborn. And if we go over to TCG, the same thing. There is a lot of buys today. So a lot of people are, I think that this is just a natural, the way that Tempo players, they're playing Izzet. I think that a lot of the Izzet players are just going to naturally go back over to Dimir. Yeah, so I could definitely see this one going to like $5. It doesn't leave a lot of room for if you're trying to like buy these off of TCG and then flip them again on TCG. That's something I talk about in this video, that's like a losing strategy to begin with. You have to find cheap ways to buy and better ways to sell, whether you go through like Facebook marketplaces, like buy lists that actually can offer a really good spread. That's a better way than trying to like buy and sell from the exact same platform. All right, we look at Preacher. Preacher is also at its low for quite some time. And again, this isn't a card that rotates. So you have an entire year where this could have spikes. Ixalan was opened like crazy. So a rare out of Ixalan is super common. But you can see, again, that this card has absolutely been purchased at a much higher frequency than it has in the last like 3-6 months. So I'm expecting at least a double up with Preacher of the Schism. Again, the thing with this card is it has just had, there's so many copies out there already for Preacher that, is there other versions of this too? I can't remember if this is like a promo. So pre-release promo, yeah, the game day. So there's a Game Damage Store Championship. But all in all, that's not a lot of different competing copies, and this could easily get up to like a $3, $4, $5 card, no problem. So getting $1 is not bad if you can rely on at some point being able to buy list these for like $3 to $4 a piece. That would definitely be a good little strategy. So the other decks that, or the other deck that I really want to pay attention to is this mono black mid-range. So I think that's going to be another go-to deck. This was at one point the top dog, and it loses. I mean, the ban list, like the decks. This deck really had a tough time versus Omniscience, and it did okay versus like Izzet and mono red, but those weren't like the reason why this deck fell out of favor is those weren't like in the bag for this deck. They could still struggle even with running 12 removal spells. It could struggle versus those two matchups. And with those matchups though becoming a lot slower and less consistent, so like Prowess is probably going to still be around with people running the what's the haste card out of gives out of Dragon's Tarkir or Tarkir Dragonstorm. That gives +3/+0. You can still go like heavier back into Slick Shot, those type of things. Like, is it Prowess? Spellslinger is still around. There are plenty of pieces for it, but it gets less consistent and a lot more glass cannony. And that, so I think that it will go from like a 50-50 matchup back in the mono black's favor for that. And they will be able to free up a lot of these spells that were dedicated to killing creatures to now dealing with like mid-range type threats. So the crux, basically this deck relies on this Unholy Annex Ritual Chamber. So you can decide what kind of demons you want to run in here. There's a 2-drop demon that's really good synergy with the Unholy Annex that came out of Final Fantasy. You still have things like the Speed Demon and Archfiend of the Dross, or there's some other demons like the Bloodletter that has the combo with the Unstoppable Zombie that people play. So there's a lot of different ways to build it, but all of them are basically running the 4 Unholy Annex Ritual Chamber. So this is a card that did spike up a ton at one point. And again, another Dustmourne card. So all in all, Dustmourne's like the real big winner, in my opinion, from the ban announcements. So if we look at the data here, yeah, same thing. There's been a big run today. So I don't think that you're too late to get in on these ones. Like the ones I picked with the Dimir and the mono black, I think are much better than trying to like hit on something that's those two are given. They're going to see a lot of play. They're going to have a huge portion of the meta because they're still the black removal package is super strong. And I would say that the most powerful card in Standard now that did not get banned is probably Unholy Annex. Just on a sheer power level of cards. This card does everything that these mid-range type black decks want to do, and getting a 2-drop demon out of Final Fantasy makes this even better. It's a really reasonable 2-drop demon, and yeah, this deck's not going anywhere. So it's very surprising that most people haven't came to that consensus as well, even if you just look at like the decks. I mean, you got Dimir midrange here in mono black, but you see a lot of the buyouts like going back to like Oculus. I'm thinking like maybe Boros tokens, cards out of Boros tokens will get another look. That deck could come back into. There's a lot of things that do like Temporary Lockdown still around. So it's going to keep a lot of these like decks that are people trying to brew around with. It's definitely keep them in check. And all in all, too, a lot of the decks that did get cards banned out of them, I don't think they're dead by any shot. Today I got even Omniscience on turn 5. So if people are still playing Omniscience, it's still good. It's still like the best of 3 that I played. It was a kind of a bait and switch, the Omniscience the first game, and then sided it out because he knew the hate was going to come in, and just turned into like an Azorius Control, and it's very easy to switch at that point. And that's interesting too, that maybe even Control, like, I mean, this is what I'm talking about. This is like an Omniscient shell basically here without Omniscience and Omniscientless Omniscience, but it's quite easy just to chuck in like a reanimation spell and an Omniscience and still have like these the combo here. So anyway, that's kind of my analysis right now for this Market Monday, is to definitely be looking at these decks that start performing well in the league, and there will be plenty of time to get in before these spike up. So typically it's going to take like 7 to 14 days, and then it's really what you want to look for is the first major tournament. So keep your eyes peeled for Standard. I think Standard is still very hot. That's one thing about Magic that it's got going for it right now, is there is a lot of movement in the market. So we did go through plenty of years, and that's why I kind of let this channel die, is because there was a point where Magic was just on a free fall. It just turned into like too much of a casual market, and standard, modern, Pioneer didn't have a lot of like movement, a lot of things that were impacting the market. But in the past year and a half, that hasn't been the case. We're definitely back to a very robust and healthy market where singles are purchased a high quantity. There's still people playing lots of standard, lots of modern, lots of Pioneer, lots of tournaments, lots of eyes on Twitch. And so, yeah, we're back into kind of the good days of that sort of side of Magic the Gathering. So anyway, hope you enjoyed this video of the Market Monday. We'll try to do this every week here on the Rogue Market channel. Thanks for watching.